There are few things more honoured in British football than the sport's oldest knockout competition. In 2016, Arsene Wenger defiantly stated, "The FA Cup is something special. You cannot imagine how big it is abroad. In England, you can't be a big club and say that we don't care about the FA Cup." For the 2017-18 season, 737 clubs entered the ultimate last man standing contest. It's a competition of heritage and tradition, adored by most and anticipated by all. Although the FA Cup is no longer revered like it once was, contrary to many fans' beliefs, it was not the BBC's overusage of the phrase "magic of the cup" which actually killed the magic, but something much simpler. It was club rationality and business-like thinking, as many realised that the competition acted as little more than a distraction from the serious business. The decline of the cup can be neatly traced from the 1970s to the present day. Until the 1990s, the FA Cup consistently got higher attendances than corresponding fixtures involving the same teams in the league. In fact, England was the only country in Europe who unfailingly achieved higher attendances, and significantly higher too, often 30% more, in the domestic cup competition than in the domestic league, illustrating that there really was some kind of ethereal and untraceable magic about the cup. The downturn in attendances started in the 1989-90 season, but plateaued at 25% higher than the league equivalent for a further 5 seasons before dropping like a stone. By the 1997-98 season, Premier League attendances drew higher crowds for the first time and has never been out-attended since. Given the timing, it would be understandable to blame the Premier League for the death of the FA Cup. That, however, would be too simplistic. It was not just the top division that out-attended the Cup, but all of England's divisions. Most tellingly is the general popularity of football during the latter stages of the 20th century. In the 1960s, Cup attendances were up at over 3 million a year, but by the early 1980s, they dropped to below 2 million. League turnouts likewise suffered due to the drastic decline in respectability for the sport. Stadiums were old and rickety, while the perception of those who did attend was that of troubled youths who enticed violence and crime. The only time that football traversed from the newspaper back pages to the front was when hooliganism was rife. Football became depicted as dangerous, and this sentiment was backed up by incidents like the Heysel Stadium disaster and the Bradford City fire, both in 1985, and the Hillsborough disaster in 1989. For all the pain caused by these horrifying instances, they had the positive effect of forcing the government to intervene and ensure that these tragic cases would never be repeated. In 1990, the Taylor Report was published. The legislation enforced all major stadiums to convert to all-seater models, ban alcohol in view of the pitch, and remove crush barriers and fences to allow spectators to flee onto the pitch if required. The Football League adopted the report and imposed all clubs competing in the top 2 divisions to adhere to the recommendations by 1994. The process effectively forced owners to invest in gentrifying the experience of watching football, which in turn expelled hooliganism. While this rejuvenation was a crucial step in the repopularizing of football, it was not the defining factor. The key change was introducing football to television. While it may seem unthinkable now, football made fleeting appearances in the front rooms of families before the 1980s. In fact, the only football matches which were televised live in the early days of broadcasting were England internationals and the FA Cup final, which were both shown on BBC One and ITV simultaneously. No wonder the Cup had an enchanted aura. The administrators of football were worried that televising live football would lead to even greater depreciating attendances. In fact, the opposite was true. Televising football allowed the public to see football for what it really was: high-value entertainment. As the saying goes, all publicity is good publicity, and football attendances grew in correlation with the number of broadcasted live matches. The financial crisis of the early 1980s forced the Football League to begrudgingly sell what they thought was their soul to the broadcasting companies. In fact, if the decision-makers had taken the time to observe what was happening in the USA, they would have noticed that their sports had seen vast growth since agreeing live television deals. From 1986 until 1992, even as Britain went through a grueling recession, attendances in the Football League grew. With Rupert Murdoch looking to expand his media conglomerate, the businessman contemplated 2 industries which he regarded as interesting markets crying out for investment. The first, pornography, posed difficult legal and ethical issues despite the reward of huge revenues, and so Murdoch settled on his secondary option, televising sport. It just so happened that, in 1992, The FA had ceded power to the clubs of the First Division to form a breakaway league, which allowed them to collectively sell their broadcasting rights and split the money between the 20 competing teams. The Premier League was born. And with BSkyB's enormous financial backing and sexy new marketing, the greatest sporting economic revival was underway. The FA and its heralded cup competition lacked the same modernising impetus and stayed loyal to the BBC, where Sky's deep pockets lent itself to shamelessly flogging the Premier League all over the world. The more frugal BBC and its prized FA Cup couldn't compete. While many wanted to believe that the FA Cup's magic lived on, the viewing figures and attendances suggested otherwise, and the clubs noticed it too. A good old-fashioned cup run was nowhere near as glamorous as a surge up the Premier League table, and so owners told their managers to prioritise. Money talks, and the prize Southampton received for finishing 17th in the Premier League, the lowest position still avoiding relegation in 2017-18, was £107.2 million. Not much of a comparison to the £3.4 million Chelsea received for winning the FA Cup. Now it seems odd that something as revered and respected as the FA Cup could crumble so feebly. In the wake of one diminished sporting institution, another rose to take its place. The Premier League now holds the honourable status of the best football competition in England and possibly the world, largely due to one man's decision to invest in football over pornography.